So, it's been a journey. I just give you a brief background to the series of events and then the final, almost a catalyst or the last straw, depending on your perspective. So I have been, I'm a professional, I'm an optometrist, family man, doing my thing. But for the last decade or so, I have been, just over a decade, I think about 12 years, I have been engaged on a complete voluntary basis, tackling racism, hate crimes, Islamophobia, and engaging the community to be part of the political system, engaging the community to be part of the media storytelling, rather than sitting back and being the narrative, so to speak. So, I've done political masterclasses. I help community institutions out, and not just the Muslim community, which I'm part of, but also the wider community. So that's been my journey for 10 years. And in that involvement, for the last, let's say for the last decade, but progressively getting worse, I have been seeing a real chasm, politically motivated, media motivated, or inspired, it depends, again, which perspective you take, of creating division between people. Brexit really highlighted that for me when, it was a real case of, at the end, it was an us and them narrative. The usual tropes that we used to hear was being, they'll take our jobs, they'll take our houses, they take our hospital appointments, etc., etc. And this was creating a real chasm. Now, when you live in a city like Leicester, which is was a beacon of multiculturalism, and to me, it still is. Obviously, we might touch upon what happened 2 years ago. It really was, for the people of Leicester, there's an insular feeling about, we do really well here. The community is thriving, for any religion here. They've got their gurdwaras, they've got their mandirs, they've got their mosques. They live, we live in the community. There's plenty economic prosperity in certain areas, restaurants, eating out. People tend to not see, they become very insular and they forget what's happening outside, the media narrative that was playing out. So, but those that are in that field know that there's this lot of bills are being passed. There's a lot of rhetoric within the media, which was causing a lot of damage. So this was happening. So then we had Brexit. Then we had subsequent cost of living crisis. And again, at this stage, where we normally felt a Labour Party, who is the traditional party that the Muslim community certainly have voted for, and I think according to Labour Muslim Network, over 70% vote for the Labour Party in the last two, maybe in the last 3 to 4 elections, largest Labour bloc supporters outside the teaching union. There wasn't an alternative. There wasn't an alternative voice to the rhetoric that was being spouted by politicians, for example, in the Tory party, who were trying to catch up to the UKIP party at that time. And now we're seeing the similar thing with Reform. And Labour wanted to catch them up. So they felt there was nobody representing us. So there was an increase in weaponizing of languages, otherizing communities, no help when communities needed it, when the cost of living crisis hit, especially those in minority areas who are usually part of the lowest socioeconomic demographics of a lot of areas, including my city. COVID, again, was a real heartbreaker. I was part of a organization called Leicester Muslim COVID Support Funeral Support Team. So what we did is we saw at the time that there was death about to enter the country and all the cities, and the images from Europe were horrific, images in Asia were horrific, and we knew we had to prepare. As Muslims, like many other faith groups, there's a ritual of bathing, of a certain way of shrouding, and a certain way of burial. So we had to ensure the dignity of that system was in place, but at the same time respecting the law of the land. When usually any Asian community, I would say, regardless of which faith group they belong to, Sikh or Hindus or Muslims, but in Muslims, I can certainly say funerals are not a private affair. When somebody passes away, hundreds and hundreds of people show up. And all of a sudden, the government legislation was, I think, 10 people could attend max. Okay, and it was changing from 8 to 10, etc. So we needed to create a system where we had people who would pick the deceased, take them to a place where they would be washed by professionals and a couple of family members, and then taken to the cemetery where there'd be a couple of people digging the graves, and the rest would be the family members. So one of my roles was, as I lay out the whole structure, was to ring people and tell family members that no, you can only have 8 people or 10 people at your father's or your sister's or your mother's funeral. Carried out to the letter. People were very respectful. There was a lot of tears on the other side of the phone. And then we find subsequently what the government was doing at that time with Boris and the parties and the breaking of the laws. And then I had families ringing me saying that you were telling me that we could only have 6 to 8 people. My grandson wanted to be there. My granddaughter wanted to. Not as blaming, but they felt the heartache. And it was heartbreaking for me as well. So these are all sort of things just to give you a background of who I am. And there's a catalogue of things. But I'm a professional man. I have a young family. I've been blessed. I'm okay. I've never been a part of a political party. I have engaged. I have supported only in one campaign. That was in 2019. Now the independent candidate in Leicester East, who was then a Labour candidate, Claudia Webb. That was about the only time I think I've actually been actively involved in campaign. Usually I hold hustings and hold parliamentarians to account, or potential parliamentarians to account. I've always liked being on that side, etc. So I don't have that political pedigree, but I've been in the heart of the community. I've supported individuals, I've supported institutions, and I've done this all completely free of charge. Then Gaza happens. And the heartache and the devastations that we've seen on the television, as per normal, as you know, the community were outraged, but really didn't have a way to channel that frustration. We marched. We still, I think, had our 15th protest this week, but it was very difficult this time. And cases of my son who loves baking, baked cakes for Ukraine, and rightfully so, came back and said he's 12 years old, and he said, "Look, Dad, I want to. I'm sure we'll be baking cakes for the Palestinians, etc." I was like, "Ask school and see what they say." And they weren't allowed to bake a cake. He wasn't even allowed to wear a pin. He was asked to remove that. So this was on the personal level. Then I went to see Jon Ashworth along with, I think there must have been about 25 of us. I haven't got the exact date. It was either the last week of October, I'm pretty sure, maybe reaching into the first few days of November, but I'm pretty sure it's the last week of October. I can get you the exact date. And there was, at this stage, regardless of what he's saying now, no tweet, social media posts about the plight of the Palestinians. I think he had rightfully expressed concerns about the rise of anti-Semitism and possibly Islamophobia in our cities, and not allowing the conflict to divide us here. But he hadn't mentioned anything about the protests. And when you think that constituency in Leicester, I think, has about 40,000 Muslims, of which about 25,000 can vote, and who he has enjoyed, they've adopted him. And he's there at every iftar party, every event institution. He's not from Leicester originally, but as per historically, they've taken him in. And so we spoke to him. Some people were very aggrieved. Some people were quite loud. My mannerisms were a lot more coherent, and we asked for 3 things at the end, of which I would have been happy with 2. One was an immediate ceasefire. Just call for an immediate ceasefire. I think by this stage, just under 8,000 Palestinians had been killed, 7,900. No semantics, no ifs and buts, just release a statement that you will call for a ceasefire, and at the first opportunity that you get, you will call for a ceasefire in the House of Commons. And the second thing at the time we asked for was immediate access to humanitarian aid. Okay, and the third thing was to make some kind of admission that maybe I should have said something sooner. That wasn't so important, but I think something to admit that there is a lot of anger in the community, and maybe I should have said something sooner. So we gave him 72 hours. He hadn't responded. Then after 2 weeks, the leader of that meeting sent them an email, and he responded by saying, I've been to see some private Muslim organizations, and I've been to Palestine, and I know what their plight is, and I've always known what their suffering is, etc., etc. But it was still no statement, no calling out clearly, as he still finds it difficult, as we saw a couple of weeks ago when he was asked to condemn Benjamin Netanyahu. It was that sort of stuttering rhetoric. So that was the point where individuals within the community decided that, somebody needs to stand up, and they spoke to myself, and I consulted, and there was a process, and then I decided to stand. What my ambition and mission and dream is there's three things I've promised the community when I've done this. One is as a private individual who has never even been on social media before this campaign started. I think I do something for my business, but I never post anything myself, really. So I'm relatively shy, but definitely private. And I'm going to give it 110%. So I'm not saying that's going to be different from any other candidate, but I have given up a lot in terms of my job, naturally my family, and putting my head above the parapet and taking everything that's been hitting me and about to hit me even more. So I'm going to give them that. But the second thing is why it might be different from any other candidate here is this is not my campaign. This is Leicester South's campaign. And I mean that from every different demographics. We built a team, and I have a social media team. You commented on my website. We've got a finance team, we've got a legal team, we've got a policy team, we've got ops team. All of these, 90% of these are volunteers from the community, young and old. And I've taken all of them up. Initially, we worked in individual silos, and then we brought all of them together. And now I've got a campaign manager and media and comms person who is more professionally based, taking a lot of the load off my shoulders. I really wanted this to be our campaign. It was this, what really inspired me for that. There has been a lot of disengagement. And for me, what I can't abide is this, other communities are doing so well, nobody likes us. This feeling of helplessness. You're looking at a lad who came to this country in the 70s as a child, whose parents couldn't speak English. We had opportunities then they don't have now. I appreciate that. But, you have to not feel sorry for yourself. Nobody's going to write your story for you. We have to write our story. So this was a motivation to bring everybody up. And we have now, yesterday I was canvassing in one of the areas, and there was 22 people there with me. And that was just one area. There was about 8 or 9 other people doing another area, and about 5 people in another area. And that's one day, all volunteers on a Sunday. So this is a community campaign, community inspired, let's say, community energized. So it's been absolutely amazing that, if nothing else, the community now is taking its future in its own hand, being part of the greatest beacon of Western civilization, democracy, we could say, and being part of that process. And being part of that process, because sometimes, especially the Muslim community, are always accused of not being part of the establishment, as Mr. Farage said the other day. But this is them being part of the system and trying to make a change in a positive way within the institutions, constitution of this country. We don't have a constitution, but you know what I mean. This weaponizing of terminology, weaponizing of phobias, of weaponizing of anti-Semitism, weaponizing of Islamophobia, for personal political reasons, is one of the main reasons why, in my long prologue, was we need to ensure why I'm standing. We need to ensure that, exactly as you've expressed there, that there's a rise now in the right, there's a rise now, so-called left. Polarization is extremely dangerous. We have to simultaneously stand up for what we believe in, but we have to reach out and believe that the people in this country overall, despite media rhetoric and negativity and Islamophobia, are extremely, extremely good. And I genuinely believe that there has to be. I mean, I work and I meet people every single day as a healthcare professional, and I talk to people, and people just want to get on in this country. Because we're an island, we don't have the same sentiments as mainland Europe, but it is creeping here. When the former prime minister of this country launches his prime minister bid by calling Muslim women, who, whatever you may think of, who wear niqabs, it's a personal choice, as bank robbers and postbox, and get away with it, it's alarm bells ringing. So as you say, this has been happening for a while. So we need to address this. So to answer your question, we need leaders who are going to have honest conversations. Okay, I'm not going to be behest with their political parties, with their own positions in cabinets or otherwise, by lobbying groups. We need honest leaders. And I'm hoping that with these independents up and down the country, a handful of really good politicians, MPs that belong to parties as well, will see that we're going to have to maybe not look at short-term gains and win elections and be in power just for the sake of it, but have honest conversations for a better future. So we need to all get to, I do not believe in we do not talk to anybody. I don't believe in that, because then the silence will just cause greater friction. We have to stand and go in and say in what we believe in on our terms. So one of the reasons, and maybe this is preempting another question of yours, is going as an independent at this particular time. Because as a campaigner before, or a champion, whatever, I used to advocate that we should be part of every political party, if we want to affect real change in society, whatever you politically believe in, even though I may disagree with you. But this particular time, we have to set the agenda as independents and have honest conversations and hold those in power accountable. We have to stand up to what we believe is true. Refer any country that is breaking international law and is causing and is committing genocide to the relevant judicial systems, international courts of justice, etc. We need enough people to stand up, be, when I say pragmatic, be able to talk to people that we on the other side and hold them to account. In my constituency, it is huge. Look, we've got the underlying issues, cost of living, universal, housing, everywhere I go, that's what they talk about. A national health service, obviously, it requires attention beyond belief. And as a healthcare professional, I know that more than most people. But Gaza, I mean, I did canvassing yesterday, and there was a lady, she was just so articulate when she said that it woke her, Gaza has woken her up, because she has voted, I think her words were, like a sheep, followed the community and thought her vote didn't matter. And Gaza has woken her up, and she will never, ever vote for the Labour Party. I have had elderly gentlemen who must be in their 70s now, if they forgive me for saying that in case they're not, who have been members of the Labour Party for 50 years, ripping up their membership. I had a gentleman I canvassed and I had a meeting with yesterday who said the Labour Party was my family and they've kicked me in the teeth. So that is the sentiment and words out of people in the community. And before there wasn't an alternative, but where do you go? Do you go to the Tories? Well, we can't really go to the Tories. And what were the other parties really standing up for? So this time they've got somewhere to channel their frustration. So yes, the general things that affect everybody does affect the community, but Gaza, for me, comes at the doorsteps in a lot of my constituencies. Well, obviously, we need a health service that's funded to survive, and not just to survive, I should say, to flourish. So the funding needs to be looked at seriously. And I know that alone is not going to be enough. But look, there's a lot of ways we can help a health service. One is taking care of, utilizing primary care services. So optometrists, dentists, pharmacists, they can reduce the waiting times in hospital by, I'm sure, 20, 30%. We need virtual clinics. I mean, we have to embrace modern technology in terms of virtual wards, virtual hospitals, virtual clinics. We need more care in the community. And to give kudos to the Lib Dems, I think they've got a fantastic policy where they're going to fund it by taxing our banks, which I think the Labour Party has refused to do so, and utilising those funds to social care. We need to pay our carers a lot, care for the carers. I was just on a picket line the other day with our care workers who have been doing band 3 and band 4 work and been paid band 2 work for the last 10 years or whatever. So they're asking for back pay. So we care for our carers. Doctors are leaving this country in droves. Nurses' application is down by 30%. We look after the people who look after our ill, utilise modern technology, utilise primary care services, and invest a lot more money. In Leicester, it's a 6-year waiting list for people on the housing, or people who are looking for housing. It's just horrendous. It's been humbling. I have learned personally a lot of my lessons. You know, when you get involved in your daily life, you tend to forget what is living sometimes within your shadow. And I went to visit, actually, you may see it on my social media post, I think today or tomorrow, a lady who lives on the 13th floor of a tower block, single mother or domestic violence victim, with a 3-year-old daughter who suffers with autism and has evident ADHD of some nature. 13th floor of a tower block where the window opens fully and it's very easy to unlock by a click of a button. And so she can't sleep because the child almost sleepwalks as well. So even at night, the child might wake up and open the window. So you can imagine, and she's been waiting now to be rehomed on a lower floor for a couple of years. So that is the state of a personal story, and I'm sure there'll be hundreds of those cases. So we need real, again, just like expansive thinking for the hospital, for the NHS. Sorry, we need this for housing. I mean, we can roll out, identify brown belts, reduce bureaucracy for building. I don't know if you know how planning works. It's extremely difficult to build. We need to build houses on brown belts. Also, at the same time, there's issues with looking after our tenants with Section 21, which the Tory party was supposed to really alter, but they didn't do, despite years of a programme that Mr. Gove was looking after. And landlords can just hike the rent, and people are evicted. I was speaking to a headmaster the other day who has eight children in his school who are now living in hotels or temporary accommodation because both parents are working in some cases, and the landlord hiked the rent. They can't afford the rent, and they get kicked out. They're living in hotels, some of them. They're living in the Hilton, which is all right for a couple of days. I don't know how much that costs the government, but they earn too much, so the kids can't afford free school meals. So they're not eligible for free school meals, but they don't have a home. And obviously they're not going to be able to afford the bus fare from out of town Hilton into inner city schools. So I don't know. It's a complete mess. It's a complete mess. And this really needs addressing. We have to look at the right to buy as well. That has to cease until there's enough houses for council houses, naturally. So more bills, reducing the bureaucracy, and ensuring those that do live in private housing are looked after as well. I would have said NHS before I started, and it's still very close to me because I'm part of NHS, and it's looked after my mum and my dad, and everybody's got a story with the NHS. I don't think you'll find anybody that doesn't. But housing, since I've started, if I could do housing, and it ties up with the cost of living, because you hear and you read, should I eat or heat? And it's just a saying, isn't it, really? Because maybe you've never lived that life in the last 40 years, maybe when I was a child. But until you go out there and you see the number of food banks. I did a food bank the other day. It was done by a Sikh community, Sikh organization, held in a church, which was, it was really nice to see the communities coming together. But the users, I think there were 82 people that day, and they were from all faith and no faiths and all backgrounds and all ages. And it was parallel to a very famous road in Leicester, which is lined with very nice, expensive restaurants. And it's just that shadow I'm talking about. it really does exist. And I think if I could help those individuals, cost of living, housing, I think that now that would be my domestic most passionate policy. And also youth, but because I just think they don't have the opportunity, and there's so much we can do. No youth clubs, not, I wasn't the brightest when I was young, but there was opportunities. You get to university, my parents wouldn't have been able to afford it now. Just, it's those sort of things that will make this country great again, I think, if we can resolve it. I certainly think it can be. I mean, for a lad that grew up in inner city Leicester, went to university, had opportunity to go to Manchester, worked in Norwich, working abroad. These were opportunities that were only given to me because I had an education. And that broadens one's horizon, meets people from different backgrounds and demographics and everything else. Without a doubt, when you have a system where people are isolated and just live in their own towns, in their own bubbles, and that's where I see a lot of the issues between all communities, the prejudices, the ignorances comes from that. If you work with people in settings which are more conducive to cooperation in the workplace, it will help in life as well. And education begins there. Especially further, I've been working with Leicester College and FE colleges, really, apprenticeships. These are the sort of things we need to champion now. We can't stop people not progressing in life because they can't get a GCSE in English or maths. We have to make it adequate for the work that they do. And I usually say that I'm sure you've called out a plumber, an electrician in your life, unless if you're a handy DIY man. And like me, I don't know if you've ever asked them what GCSE they've had in English or maths. Ever. Probably not. So as long as it's adequate for their role, schools and colleges should champion it, and we need to get these people working, contributing to society, paying the taxes. That money can be used for reducing tuition fees or abolishing them as well. That would be a dream. Well, I'm a Leicester City fan, season ticket holder. We did win the Premiership, if somebody's not heard, and the FA Cup and the Charity Shield and everything else. So I love Leicester City Football Club and have been a fan. I'll give my age away, but you already obviously know it. Is when at the first game I went to, Gary Lineker was on the bench. So some time ago then. I love the I know it's a cliche, and what really hurt is when Suella Braverman went to New York and addressed, I think, a room full of right-wing or far-right think tanks and possibly journalists, and cited Leicester as an example of multiculturalism failing. It was absolutely disgraceful. We are a city that we are proud in our multiculturalism. We've got people from every ethnicity, every background. Our food is absolutely fabulous. Our cooperation is fabulous. We've got beautiful countryside, we've got beautiful people. So I do love Leicester. I think there was a narrative at that moment of, not allowing people to come into this country. The terminology that they used was hordes and swarms and etc. etc. And further, people coming to this country would mean there would be people of different cultures having to coexist and cohabitate with each other. And it just fits into their narrative that this can never work. And let's look at Leicester, despite the fact I think she stood as a candidate in this city and enjoyed a lot of food from our famous Golden Mile streets at the time. And for a woman, I think, whose parent heritage is East African and Mauritian, I think possibly born a Hindu, practices Buddhism, is married to an Israeli, serves a Hindu prime minister, succeeded a Hindu home secretary. To say multiculturalism is dead, it just doesn't make sense in any shape or form. It's that political rhetoric that is there to divide for political gain. And this is what we need to stop. And to make people like her, sorry I'm even having to talk about her, relevant. There's absolutely no difference. That you've got the two-child tax cap, and he's not going to take that back. When he spoke about taxing banks previously, before he was selected, he has taken that back. I think he's starting to make some noise about nationalising companies, etc. But that he went very quiet on that as well, especially things like water, which we all know, with the amount of manure in our rivers at the moment, even threatening the Oxford-Cambridge boat race. So there's no difference politically. Okay, it appears, as he says, when you've got room in your party for Natalie Elphicke, but you really have to carry something like really heavy load up a hill to get Diane Abbott back into it, into your party. It's not a broad church. It's just it's an Amazon warehouse. It's just huge, and yet no room for people like Faiza Shaheen. No room for Jeremy Corbyn. And it's just power for the power's sake. And I understand how political systems work, and you need to get into power and then you can make the changes. But from what he has said to become the leader of the Labour Party, and then he retracted Mr. Flippity Flop, or whatever they like to call him. And now what assurances we have that these things are being said just to get into power, and then once in power, he won't renegade on those promises. But fundamentally and ultimately, when you have a genocide unfolding in Gaza, according to all international courts and many human rights organizations, and no matter what he says now, we all heard categorically when he said Israel has the right to withhold power and food and water, and it was reiterated by Lammy and Thornbury until a week or two later. Then there was some kind of, I think it was about 10 days before he sort of retracted and said something similar. But it's just how it is. They say one thing, you hear them say that thing, and then, no, I actually didn't say that. Abstain from a vote for a ceasefire, but no, I didn't abstain. I voted for an alternative. It's just semantics. It's absolute semantics. People are not fooled. And after the council elections last month, they realised that in Muslim-majority constituencies, Labour lost a lot of support, and to their own admissions, we need to bring back trust. So therefore, let's go on a charm offensive. That is adding salt to wounds. It's unbelievable. People are not that stupid, Mr. Starmer, and they will let you know at the ballot box. On the 4th of July, Independence Day, we have to vote independent. We have to write the narrative of our city. We need to create a better future for all of us, for all our children, for our futures. We can't trust the established parties because they're in it for themselves and not in it for us. So we have to make the right choice. Give your trust to somebody who will look out for Leicester, build communities, not cabinets, and take our city forward, and only be accountable to you and not accountable to any leadership. And you will be the people I'm accountable to. So that will be my message. Make the decision and make Leicester, like we have done in lots of other areas, be the shining example for the rest of the country to follow.